Hey everyone, it's Sergeant Rajan with Uniform Recruitment for the OPP, and thanks for joining us for another session of AMA on this beautiful April 8th. I'm going to say beautiful because it was sunny, but it's pretty cold out there, so hopefully spring kicks in. A few things I want to highlight. First, starting with our info session last week at GHQ that I held. Thanks for all those that did show up right before the long weekend. It was a really good, engaging session, and I've had a lot of follow-up on it and questions about application submission. So for those of you that did reach out, I hope you get the chance to get your application in. And a few other points about some of the events that we have coming up in terms of shuttle runs. We have a lot of them actually coming up this month, specifically in Aurelia, Ottawa. We have a women's focused shuttle run in Aurelia on April 20th. We have the one on April 14th in Aurelia for the general, and certainly on April 19th we have one in Ottawa, along with the Tobico, April 23rd, Cambridge, April 27th, Niagara, April 28th, and Caledon on April 29th. So for those of you that have signed up, look forward to seeing you there. Myself and my colleagues, we will be at most of these locations doing the shuttle runs. And I just want to make it very, very clear that, when you submit your application, the first stage of your assessment is your fitness. So whether you come to one of our sessions prior to submitting your application or even after submitting your application, if you come to our in-person shuttle run session, you'll be able to obtain your fitness certificate, again, which gives you 30 days to get that application in. So that way we can expedite your file through the process much, much quicker. So please just be aware of it. That is very, very important for you to get that shuttle done, achieving level 7, showing us that you are capable of achieving level 7. What is it that we're going to talk about today? And certainly we have our chat open here. So if you have any questions, certainly let us know. That way I can address some of your questions. But what I want to speak to, and again, it's a question that we've been getting through emails and chats, is a day in the life of an officer. In terms of what happens on the road as a brand new officer, or even as an officer as you get in 2 to 3 years into it. I myself started off at a general duties detachment. I started off in Queen West Detachment in the East Region, which is a detachment close to Belleville, Ontario. So I did a few years there when I was first hired, and then I transferred to the HSD Highway Safety Division in Toronto, which is our Keel and 401 detachment. So I had the chance to work in both areas. So from a general duties perspective, the calls that come generally in that environment, and then switching over to the HSD environment, where it's a traffic-based detachment. So I'm going to try to kind of capture what you can expect working in both of those scenarios. Starting off as a brand new officer, when I first showed up to Queen West Detachment, I was fortunate. I had a really good coach officer. My coach officer is retired now, but he was a seasoned officer in the sense he had over 25 years of service at that point. So I was getting a coach officer that really had a really strong base with investigative skill, because he worked in different units. He worked as a detective. He had a really strong base when it came to the Highway Traffic Act, which was my bread and butter in terms of what my interest was. So I had a really good coach. So many of you that eventually when you do report to duty, your coach officer will be your point of contact as a brand new officer. They will be overseeing you throughout the full probationary period, right? You're 1 year as you're on probation, they will be overseeing you. And I myself was a coach officer, so I'll transition to what that was like later on. But certainly your coach officer would be a point of contact. As a new officer, when you're on the road, everything's very new, right? The routine, even in your personal life, it'll be very new in terms of showing up for duty. So usually our detachments officers would report for a day shift early in the morning, and certainly night shift in the evening. So usually 6 a.m. is when the officers would start for a day shift, and certainly 6 p.m. is what they would start for night shift. It varies depending on different shifts that you might work. but pretty general. In general, that's pretty much consistent across the board. When you show up in the morning, I usually got to detachment around 5 in the morning for a 6 a.m. shift. A quick workout in the gym, go for a run, get your mind right, your body right. I found that the run in the mornings, usually each detachment, they have their own gym available to you 24/7. So for me, that was a great start off point. Went there, got my run in the morning done. You have amazing facilities where you can get ready. So by the time you get ready for a shift around 5:45 a.m., getting ready, putting your uniform on, getting all your use of force settled in. It was a good routine to get into. I think that's one of the biggest keys. You have to set yourself up in a very, very good rhythm and routine for you to be successful as you go through, especially your first year where there's a lot of things asked of you. So having the good work routine and your personal routine will set you up for success. I always showed up early. You never want to be late as a rookie officer or the probationary officer. One, again, you're being assessed, right? You're being assessed, and you want to show not only your coach, your supervisor, your sergeant that's on duty, but certainly your fellow constables that you're working with, that you're dialed in, right? So that's one thing that I always made sure I kept in. I think a question came in, what do you eat? For me, it was 2 boiled eggs, oatmeal with a bit of fruit, blueberries and strawberries, and I had a protein shake. That was pretty much it for me after the morning routine. So it gave me sustainability, gave me energy, and you're making sure you get the protein factor right. Usually 5:45 to 6 when you go in the constables area there. That's when you have your parade with your sergeants. Usually you'll get your assignments. Every detachment has a zone in terms of what they're overseeing, and you'll have zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, depending on how big your proximity of area that you cover. And for each zones you get assigned. So being a brand new officer, I always got assigned zone 1 because it was the busiest zone for call volume. So that's where I got assigned as a brand new officer. Because as a new officer, you're expected to understand the role of a police officer, and the only way you're going to understand the role of a police officer is to attend the calls, because every single call that you go to is now an opportunity for you to learn and grow, and really enhance your knowledge of policing, the paperwork side of it, but also talking to the people, right? So talking to people that you're involved with, certainly understanding and solving problems. Certainly that's where you really start to learn the bread and butter of policing, right? So that's where, for me, it's really started to go on, and you have your coach officer there to help you through, right? So initially, the first 2 months, your coach officer is with you all the time. They're essentially, you're riding in the car with them. They're sitting beside you in the passenger seat. You're going through scenarios as you're driving to calls. That's what my coach did for me. As the call came in, we would take it. We would respond, acknowledging that we are en route to the call. And then we would talk about what the game plan was, right? What is it that we're going to do? First, we would understand what the call is, what sort of legal avenues that we have at our disposal, whether it was a Trespass to Property Act, or if it was a criminal code offense, what avenues we would go there, or if it was a Highway Traffic Act call, what sort of avenues we have in terms of police powers, right? So you always have to formulate a game plan as you're going en route. You have your dispatcher, which is essentially your eyes and ears in many sense. So they get the call from the 911 call. They would take out all the pertinent information, and they would provide that to you. So your dispatcher is your lifeline. So anything that you need, you are going to them for everything. And I did that all the time. My dispatcher would get calls from me all the time, just to get more info. So if I'm going to a call, I made sure that I would call and get more info, further info. And if there was things that I did not understand, I would ask the dispatcher to call the person that was relaying the call to get more info, which is, again, more info at your disposal, so you're better prepared as you're going to the call. Okay. So again, you want to be as prepared as possible, because, again, as a new officer, you don't know a lot of things. You're trying to learn. So these are the things that are going to make you better prepared. Question here, I think one of the questions, I'm from India and watch a lot of US cop shows. So I want to know, ask a real cop if that is what policing in Ontario is like in real life. Like things happening a lot, every cop is busy. Is that the case? Um, Absolutely. So depending on where you work, so certainly, for example, if you're working in the GTA, certainly I can speak from my experience working as a road officer in the Toronto detachment. It is a very, very busy detachment because we oversee the busiest highway in North America, Highway 401. And the stretch of Highway 401 that passes through the Toronto detachment area, you get so many different highways that we oversee: 401, Highway 401, Highway 404, Highway 427, Highway 409, Highway 400. So again, so many different areas, and then you have all the other surrounding highways: 407, 412. Again, so all these different highways that have a lot of traffic moving through it, which naturally creates a lot of issues, right? Collisions, which is very regular. But then you have other different type of calls too, from assaults to domestic incidents, right? So they have all these other varying calls that you also deal with. And also, obviously, as a police officer, you also want to do proactive policing, which means the big four that's enforced in the GTA: speeding, aggressive driving, distracted driving, and failure to wear seatbelt. So these are some things that the officers also enforce, just from a safety perspective, right? So from a GTA perspective, working in the Toronto detachment was a very busy detachment. There could be days where you're just going from call to call to call because it's so busy. But I think this is where the team that you work with or your platoon that you work in has a huge impact. And I felt when I was in Toronto detachment, I had a really strong team. I had a really good sergeant that oversaw what the team did. But certainly, an officer on my platoon, if I'm going to a call and they felt like, what, it was probably better for them to come and help me with it, they would naturally acknowledge on the radio, let the dispatcher know that they're coming to the call to assist, and they would make their way to my call. Because sometimes when you have two officers, it's always a better scenario because you can play things off of each other. You can talk about scenarios and resolve the problem faster, right? Another question here. I'm currently an auxiliary member and in the process of finishing hours. Would it be acceptable to submit before finishing, as the recruitment process can be lengthy? Talking about auxiliary as an entry point. Again, so depending on how long you've been an auxiliary, if you feel that you're ready, if you feel like the auxiliary program has given you what you wanted to learn and it's giving you confidence, growth, and learning overall, and you feel motivated and you feel ready to pursue the position, then I would say absolutely go and do it. Again, auxiliary position, most of our auxiliary members are there between 2 to 5 years in that role to learn the position, but also to learn what policing is all about, learn what the organization is all about. So if you're confident that the amount of time you've had in that role is satisfactory, then I would truly encourage you to apply, because again, that is what the experience you've gained will help you as you go through the constable process. Okay. Yeah, so going back to what I was talking about there, as a frontline officer, going back to my time, when you're on probation, every 2 months you're having evaluations done, right? And for your evaluations to be strong and in depth, you certainly have to have varying calls or experience that you can talk about. So that means certainly, going to the calls, dealing with the calls, and learning from them. Because as you go and learn, your confidence is increased, and what you see in terms of different things, you'll be able to really see ahead of time. What I mean by that is, as you go to the call, you're seeing nuances, you're seeing things happen. You'll be able to pick it up right away and know, okay, you know what, A, C, this is what's happening, resolve it. With brand new officer, you won't be able to, figure it out right away, right? Question: What is the difference between a day in the life of a provincial constable versus someone of a higher rank, i.e., a sergeant? So, good question. So let's break it down. So as a road officer, you're essentially led by a sergeant. So a platoon can have a sergeant, which is your supervisor, and each platoon could vary in numbers, right? From 10 officers, 12 officers per platoon, depending on what's happening in that situation. Some officers have court that they would need to attend. Some officers would have, they're away for training. That could happen. But essentially, you try to have a strong number of officers in each platoon. And again, each zone, you would have at least maybe 2 to 3, 4 officers per zone. As the calls come in, you would essentially, take the call, attend the call, and as one officer is busy with the call, if another call comes in, and the next officer will jump in to take that call, right? So the reason especially was very, very important in the GTA, and many of you probably know this if you drive the Highway 401, when a lane's blocked or a couple of lanes are blocked because of a collision or some serious incident, now that really packs up the highway. It really delays people from moving across the city, and our job is to make sure we clear it from a safety perspective, but we also want to make sure the traffic is flowing in a safe manner. So it's very, very crucial that we attend the call right away, we clear the roads, we also provide help. So if people are injured or there's things of that nature, if there's a criminal element that needs to be investigated, these are things that need to be done in a timely manner. So it's very, very crucial that officers get to the call right away and act on it. So that was the priority for me anyway, when I was a road officer in Toronto, to attend the calls. The sergeant is overseeing the platoon, overseeing the officers. So essentially they're managing the work that's being done. So if a call is coming over, they're making sure that the officers are going to it. And if the officers have any questions about the calls, the officers have any questions about specific roles or specific scenarios in a call, the sergeant would step in to help them out, right? Provide clarity. Usually the sergeant would be more of a senior officer with more experience on the road, right? So that way the junior officers can go to the sergeant for assistance, right? Another question here, can you speak on how shift rotations typically work within the OPP detachment? How much variability there is depending on location? So there are different shifts schedules that detachments work depending on where you work, the region that you work in. The Toronto detachment, when I was a road officer, we worked the 4 days on, 4 days off. Usually it was a 12-hour shift. Our day shift was from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and our night shift was from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So the first 2 days you're on day shift, and the next 2 days you're on night shift. So you would work the 4 days, then you would be off for the next 4 days, and it just keeps moving forward just that way, right? I like that shift. I had no problem with it because again, on my days that I did have off, that's where I would do a lot of my personal chores or personal things that I need to get to. I would go to my gym, do my gym workouts, all the things that you want to get to, your personal errands, certainly can help. And sometimes on the days off, certainly I came in to do overtime or paid duties of that things that are also available to you as an officer, right? So these are things that you can really capitalize on from a salary perspective, right? How long does it typically take to move up the ranks after becoming a PC? It could vary. It could vary depending on what your interest is, right? Usually people, as a provincial constable, as a frontline officer, they're in that role for, I would say, about 5 years, because it takes time for you to learn the role of a police constable, right? It takes time for you to learn the bread and butter of policing. And the other thing I want to highlight is there's so many different roles of policing, right? You can go into the media side of it. You can go into child exploitation. You can go into being a canine officer. You can go into being a true officer. There's hundreds of specialty roles that are available. So that's where it comes down to what your interest is, and the way you'll find out or get to know what your interest is will be through working on the road, right? You get exposed to varying calls, and then you find out what your strength is, what your motivation is, or what area of specialty is kind of you're being drawn to. So in my role currently, I'm a recruitment officer. I'm a recruitment sergeant. So my role is something I love doing. I'm passionate about. I'm very motivated because my role is to talk about the profession of policing, share information, and essentially provide insight, guidance, mentorship to people that want to be a police officer. And my role is to play a bit in coaching and mentoring people to achieve their dream. So many people, that I was on the road with are in various roles throughout the province, where they kind of pursued it in terms of what their interest is. So I think it does take a bit of time for you as a frontline officer to understand what that role is, to find that out, and certainly then you can pursue it. Okay. Um, how many open case files do you normally have in a week as a road officer, and are you supposed to close every file as you get them? Great question. So we call it a task list. So anytime you go to a call, certainly a task is generated, or calls are generated, call or occurrence number is associated to a call. So for example, if it's a minor, let's say a collision, minor motor vehicle collision, that is something you can probably start and close off before the end of the day, right? Because you go to the call, you find out what's happening. If it's two motor vehicle collision, two people involved in a motor vehicle collision, you would usually do the report at the scene. You would give both people the paperwork, right? A collision report occurrence, and then essentially you would come back, do up your notes, do up the report online, and then you would submit it for completion, and then your sergeant would go in to review it and accept it. If there's any changes that need to be made, your sergeant would kick you back the report, and you would have to make those changes. So a very simple, straightforward collision report occurrence could be done that way. But if it's a very complex investigation, maybe say there was an impaired investigation, right? You go to a collision scene, and then the driver was impaired, and you ended up arresting the driver for impaired offense. Now there's a lot more paperwork that comes with it, so you probably won't be able to close off that occurrence within a day. You probably will be working on it for a few days, and that task would be sitting on your task list for a few days till all your paperwork is complete for that, all the report is submitted, and it's approved by the sergeant, right? Because obviously when it's an impaired case, that is going to potentially go for trial in the court, which means there's follow-up that probably is going to be coming later on. But majority of the calls in the HSD, depending on how severe it is, you will have a running task list. Not every single call would be wrapped up within a day. And especially if you're working in a general duties detachment, certainly you would have a very, very large task list of items that you need to follow up on. And usually, officers would follow up on these calls whenever they get downtime, where they can sit and write the reports and follow up on calls and follow up on witnesses. So there is tons of follow up that does usually happen. I think this is where the whole time management skill comes into play. If you are really good at managing your time and you're able to keep some occurrences from not being delayed, it's very, very crucial, because there's things on the line, right? So in terms of evidence that needs to be properly sent over to the Crown, witness notifications, and follow-up. So again, as long as you're able to manage your time and do things in a timely manner, you'll be able to keep your task list from really getting out of hand. But certainly, if your task list gets out of hand, I think that's when your sergeant will probably ground you. This has happened to me a few times, where I had to be grounded so that way I could catch up on all my paperwork. For all the work that you do on the road, there is a paperwork side to it on the back end. So as long as you're able to manage that and make sure it doesn't get out of hand, you'll be totally fine. Okay. So another question here, and thanks for the questions. Really, really good questions. How does a role like yours differ from, say, a traffic sergeant? Does your role vary significantly? Yes. So every single role in terms of the type of unit that you're in, especially when you're in a specialty unit, it would vary. So in my role as a recruitment sergeant, again, I'm traveling all across the province, doing recruitment events, I'm doing interviews. Essentially, it's very, very focused on hiring and recruitment. If you're maybe a sergeant on the road overseeing a platoon, now you're seeing the work that's being done on a platoon level, answering to calls for service, making sure the calls are being properly answered. The officers are getting the support that they need in terms of what they're doing. If anything is missed, certainly you're topping them up and making sure they're being coached and they learn how to do things properly. So it does differ because your responsibilities are different. Certainly, and that can go beyond. If you're a sergeant in a K9 unit, now obviously your role is very, very specific, right? You're overseeing a K9 unit that's deployed across the province, and you're seeing what that that role is, right? So I think depending on what role you get into as a supervisor or even as a constable, it is very, very different in when it comes to that. Okay. Another question here. In terms of application process, how much influence does the background investigator have on the possible candidate being hired? Yeah, great question also there. So the background investigation phase is started after you are successful at the interview stage. So once you're successful at the interview stage, a background investigator will be assigned to your file, and they will call you. Usually, they will introduce themselves, and they will probably give you a guideline of what's going to happen, what their expectations are, and certainly they would need your help on completing your background. So essentially, the background investigator will go through everything that you submitted from the application stage to the interview, and certainly for them, it's about capturing a picture or a snapshot of everything that you bring to the table, your past history, your current experience. So essentially, a good portfolio of who you are as a candidate. And then it's used to assess you to see if you're a competitive candidate and if you are the type of candidate that we are looking for. That is just one of the things that's used along with other things for the assessment phase. Okay, so they do play a very, very in-depth role in assessing you as a candidate. Okay. Another question is, does a day in the life vary significantly between regions? I can imagine that HSD is extremely busy, but with regards to other areas, how might a day in the life differ from a northern perspective versus a central or a southern perspective? Yeah, great question. So as you know, we have different regions. We have the Northeast and Northwest. We have the East region, West region. We have Central region, and then you have HSD. So 6 regions that you can potentially work for or work out of, depending on where you choose to go. One big difference, obviously, geographically, there's varying differences. So, for example, if you're an HSD officer, you're predominantly working on the provincial highways because that's our mandate in the HSD. We oversee the provincial highways. But if you go to East region or West region or Northeast, Northwest, or Central, there are detachments there now where you would be doing more of a general duties policing environment, right? And if you even go further, Northeast and Northwest, you're going into very, very detachments that are very, very remote. You can also work in a very, very remote type of detachment. So the type of calls that you would experience, the type of environment that you would work in will vary, and that will impact the type of calls that you may respond to, right? So it would definitely have an impact. I worked in East Region. Obviously, I worked in HSD. I've done calls for service or when you have major deployments. I've gone to other regions to do deployments. So you would have to adapt. One, I think it's a challenge because when you go to a different environment, you have to understand the surrounding. You probably wouldn't know the geographical location, so that takes a bit of time for you to understand where you're going. You might have to use GPS to get there, and even in smaller communities that you work, sometimes it's more of a community-based policing in the sense that you would have to work with the community to solve some issues or understand what's going on. Whereas in the GTA, usually the people that you would deal with, they're passing through, or you would never see the same person that you stop once. Whereas in a smaller community, you would have people that you deal with on a regular basis. That would be very, very common, and I found that to be true in Queen West detachment. You would have regular people that you would constantly deal with. Okay. Another question here. Can you please provide some more info about the home interview? Do they visit your home and meet your family? Yes. So the home interview process, it will vary depending on what the background investigator wants to do. Our home interviews absolutely will have the background investigator coming to you, meeting your family, your partner. Usually it's you and your partner, or if you have extended family that's living with you, whoever lives with you in that home, they will be able to meet them, talk to them. Many people get very, I guess, concerned or nervous about that specific stage, but there's nothing to be nervous about. It's just for the background investigator to, again, get a chance to meet you in person, talk to you, and certainly the people that influence or have impact in your day-to-day life, get to know them, and it's more of a wholesome experience, engaging experience, nothing that you need to be concerned or worried about. Okay. Um, Great questions, by the way. So I appreciate the engagement everyone's showing here. Um, what has been your favorite role in your policing career thus far? Um, when I think about my role so far, I really enjoyed my frontline experience. I think when I was a HSD officer in Toronto, when I came there, Toronto's home to me, right? Toronto's where I grew up, so I knew the place. I knew the city. I felt like it was home to me. So every single place that I would go to, or places I used to go to, like the local pizza shop, growing up, going by eating a slice there. Now I was showing up as a police officer, so it was kind of surreal. People knew who I was, so that was kind of a very personal touch there. But I think when I look at the platoon that I worked with, I think I had a really, really good platoon. I had a really good bunch of officers that were very helpful. They were very engaged, and it was a lot of fun coming into work. I really looked forward to coming into work because one, I was learning. As a new officer, you're always learning. You're being put in different situations, and Toronto was so busy, so you don't know what sort of calls you are going to or you're getting into. And when we did have calls that really stump you, you had to lean on your fellow officers that had experience in specific areas, or they would provide you with a suggestion that you can kind of look up. So teamwork, working with them, and even just the camaraderie piece. I think many people don't understand the camaraderie piece that comes with working in this environment. Again, you're all police officers. You're all out there, protecting the public. You're there for a purpose, right? You're there to serve. But then doing it with the people that you enjoy, going to calls, problem solving, and really helping each other with the paperwork side. And I kid you not, there's a lot of paperwork, but it's fun when you do it with the people that you really do get along with. It made the 12-hour shift fly by. For me, I always felt like I came into work, and then before you knew it, the shift was over. So I think from that perspective, I really had a really, really good time on my front line. I was on the front line for a number of years, so it really made my policing experience on the front line really engaging and fun, and I do miss that. Not only that, and there's a lot more things you get to do. One of the biggest things that I think a lot of people do take advantage of on the front line is the time off. There's a good amount of time off that you can have to, rest and recover emotionally, mentally, and physically. Because some of the things that we're exposed to is impactful, right? So I think the time off is what was really great. I was able to take part in varying, like, special deployments that send you all over the province. So that's another unique experience that you get to do in terms of traveling to different communities across the province to take part in roles or initiatives or projects that you would have to help out with. So that was really, really beneficial for my growth and learning. Another question here: is there such thing as a normal day in the OPP as a uniform member, or do things vary pretty significantly day to day? There is no such thing as a normal day in the OPP. I think as a frontline officer, you can show up thinking it's going to be a quiet day, and I think people hate it when officers say the Q word, because that means something is going to go off very quickly. So I don't think there's such thing as a normal day. I think the days vary. Sometimes it's very, very busy. Sometimes it is not, and that's the day that you try to get all your paperwork done. You catch up on all the things that you want to catch up on, because you just don't know what's around the corner. You don't know what sort of call is going to come out, and how much of that time of your shift that is going to eat up, right? So that's something that you always have to be aware of. And I go back to that time management piece. I think if you're able to manage your time, certainly you'll be able to manage your task list and all the calls that you get throughout your shift, right? Um, a question I see here: are you ever afraid to approach a car? Yeah, good question. Um, no matter how seasoned you are as an officer, no matter how experienced you are, I think there's always um, a sense of unknown, right? You just don't know what's going to happen with the call anytime. Especially as a highway safety division officer, one, you're doing your traffic stop on the provincial highways, so vehicles are traveling very, very fast. So it's very, very crucial that you understand where you want to make the traffic stop, because that impacts your safety, but also it impacts the safety of the vehicle that you have stopped, and you're responsible for both, right? Whatever happens, you're responsible for both. So you want to make sure you're pulling them over in a good spot, wherever that is. I always did a passenger side approach. I never approached the driver, or I rarely approach a driver on the driver's side, because you're exposing yourself to the traffic. So I always try to do a passenger side approach. It's safer for you. And again, you always want to be aware, and you always want to make sure your team and your dispatcher knew where you are. So anytime you make the traffic stop, you're always radioing it in, so they're aware. You're making sure you're putting it on your mobile workstation, so they, from a GPS location, they know where you are. So if things do go south and you need to act right away, people know where to show up and where you were in terms of the last spot that you were known, right, for the traffic stop. So there are a lot of logistical and officer safety issues that, again, we train you on. We train you on all these things, and your coach officer will make sure that they train you on it consistently, right, till you get to a point where it's second nature for you. So that was, I was very grateful for my platoon and my sergeants and my coach officer for making sure that they kind of instill that officer safety mentality, because at the end of the day, it's very, very important that you do everything you need to do. So at the end of the day, you're going home to your loved ones, right? So that's very, very important. So all the safety measures that we have in place, and again, with technology, I think that's just increased. Certainly with body cameras that we have now, certainly that's another area of where officer safety comes into place, and obviously justification comes into place too. So it's been a very, very good thing for us, for officers, certainly in that sense. A few more questions before we wrap up. But again, thanks for all the questions here. I probably did miss some, but I will try to get to it as soon as I can. If I don't, hopefully I'll get to it at the next session. All right. Question here: how do you manage stress? I think, whether you're a police officer or not, we all, in some sense, go through stress or slightness of it in our personal lives, in our work lives. And I think you have to have the right outlets. You need to have the right people that you can lean on or speak to, or get help from. Certainly in the OPP, we certainly have mental health clinicians that are available to us, that work in the detachments with us. So if you are ever feeling like you want to talk to someone, or something's bothering you, something's on your mind, you're always able to kind of reach out to them, go have a sit and chat with them, which I have done before. Just to get it off your chest, right? And I think personally, just having the right people around you in your personal lives, that you can have a candid conversation, an honest conversation, to let them know, hey, you know what, I'm not feeling good about this, or I'm not feeling right about this, and just to speak it out and get it out there, right? I think that's where very important. In my team right now that I work in, I think I work with a bunch of amazing people, from my management to my colleagues. I think we're able to have really honest conversations where you're able to lean on each other, and I think people would recognize when something is off. So that kind of shows the investment they have in you in terms of how they know, or how much they know about you. So I think as long as you have the right outlets, and certainly fitness is a outlet for many people, and certainly for me, I feel it's the same too. I like going for runs. Certainly that always kind of clears up my mind. So I think whatever it is that you do to reset, I think you just need to know that, because when you get into this career, there are things that you will be seeing on the front line, or you will be experiencing, and you have to be able to manage it. And sometimes if you need to take a knee, you need to take a knee. That's just the reality of it. So as long as you can be understanding of it, you'll certainly overcome it. Okay. Again, a few more questions here as we wrap up. Here, let me see if there's one that I did not address. But again, thanks for the questions here. Thank you for the service. We appreciate it. Appreciate that comment. Thank you very much. I really want to get a good question that I haven't. Okay, question here, Sergeant Prash. I'm in the process of completing my application for the constable process. However, I'm a bit worried about my credit. I'm not sure if I should wait till I fix it. Again, a bit overall question. I'll try to answer it the best I can. Not really knowing the specifics of what your credit you're concerned about. Certainly at the interview stage, we do go over your financial obligations, and certainly at the background stage, that is something that we will look at. If you've had scenarios in the past where you weren't able to meet your financial obligations, certainly, we expect that you would speak about that, talk about it, explain it, and talk about the challenges that you had. Sometimes in life you have financial challenges. It's not easy, and that's just the reality of life. So if you made choices that were detrimental to your financial history, certainly talk about it. Don't hide it. Just talk about it, explain it, and show us a pattern of how you improved from it or how you learned from it. And that's what we're looking for. So if you can show us that, this is how you've addressed it, this is how you paid off some of these debt, and this is how you're improving to continue to make a positive financial history, that is what we're looking for. And that's all you can do. And then leave the rest to us for us to assess you in that area. But don't let that stop you from submitting your application, right? Don't let that stop you from getting that application in, because maybe what you're thinking is a significant deterrence might not be as huge as you think it is. So let us assess that. Let us, see where you stand, and we will let you know, right? So, but don't let that restrict you from submitting the application. Okay. One last question here as we wrap up. Just want to get a good one here. Thank you. You're welcome. Appreciate it. I know there's a few questions here that are probably something that I can't even answer. So, question here: are you required to know all the laws, or are you just required to know how to access it in the database? Great question. So, as you know, there are so many avenues of law, so many areas that officers have to deal with, and you're not expected to know all of them off the top of your mind. It's impossible. It's not possible for you to know all of it. There's just too much. But we do have internal databases that you're able to reference and pull up. So when you're, for example, if you're on a traffic stop and you want the specific wording or specific language of what that offense is, you're able to within seconds pull up the specific area or specific code, whether it's the criminal code, highway traffic act, or trespass to property act, whatever act that you want to pull up, whether it was the provincial or federal or criminal code, you'll be able to access it right away. You'll be able to read through it. You'll know exactly where and which avenue it's available to you, right? So with the technology that we have available, you're able to do it with an instant. I know back in the day we had the big red criminal code book that we had to flip through, but now everything is at your fingertips, that you're able to access it right away. Okay. So in saying that, again, we'll wrap it up here. Again, thank you for the engagement today. Great questions. I hope again I can potentially talk on and on and on about some of these topics, especially as a brand new officer. Even being a coach officer, certainly something that was very impactful for me, for the people that for the two officers that I was a coach officer for. But certainly, the great thing about it is you'll get to learn about it. If you were able to get your application in and you're successful, which I hope many of you are, you'll be able to experience it once you hit the detachment, being a brand new recruit, being a probation officer. No matter what detachment you report out of, certainly you'll get a varying experience. But overall, I think the policing part is the same, no matter where you work. Growth, the ability to learn and enhance and move into different roles as you go through your career, that's pretty consistent, right? And I think it's just a matter of finding out what your niche is and what your motivation for a specific role is, and you just pursue that. So in saying that, we'll wrap it up for today. Hope to see many of you at our shuttle run sessions coming up. I know I listed them off at the start of the session, but if you go to opp.ca/events, certainly you'll see all the ones, and certainly I hope to see many of you there. Or please come on by to one of our virtual info session coming up next week and the week after, and certainly our in-person sessions where we do them at GHQ, and we'll also start doing them at regions coming up shortly. All right. So in saying that, have a wonderful Wednesday, everyone, and we'll see you at the next AMA. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.